not because they love the country they're fighting for. They love the money they're being paid. And when the money ran out, they turned and wiped out Carthage, right? And the Romans then were successful because Romans fought for Rome. They fought for their own country. And so we see that, I think, even in today's world. If you identify with the country that you came from rather than here in the United States, then that's where your loyalties will be. And when it comes to a time when you have to choose, then you're going to choose what you're loyal to.
I have kind of a personal experience with this. Was several years ago now, but we were working for a gentleman up in Robbinsville, and he was from, I think, in Alabama, but he is an Indian. But and we were talking about different things, and what he identified, about loyalty and unity, and he said his first loyalty was to his chief in his tribe back in Alabama. He had been very successful in what he was doing and had made apparently a lot of money, and we helped him spend some of it. But the point was, his initial loyalty was to his tribe, and then, I don't know, to his state, and then, the country was kind of at the end of the line. But here is the opposite of that. They were not loyal to their tribe, they were loyal to God. Gary?
I think, like Cindy is talking about commitment, they were totally different than their predecessors who didn't have that loyalty. That's why they ended up going back wandering for 40 years. But for these men, sounded like the biggest percentages of able-bodied men went and left their cattle, their wives, their children over there. They had to believe that God was going to protect their families while they were gone doing this. Because, somebody snuck around and take all, because they apparently had a lot of very good cattle. And
well, they carried the gold out of Egypt. They carried the whole nation's gold out of Egypt.
Yeah, so they had real commitment to the Lord in that sense, to go off and leave all that and go fight. I mean, they had some good excuses not to.
One of the questions that kind of came up in doing some reading is the Israelites were admonished to basically, like in Jericho, they went in, they killed everything. They killed every living creature. Other places, other battles that occurred after that, they took care of all the people, but the animals they did not slaughter. That seems kind of harsh, doesn't it, by our standards today? It seems very harsh. But in reading about that, the author of the article, whatever I was reading, God had been dealing with these people over time, and they had plenty of warnings to change their attitude or change their minds, or they're not to come out against the Israelites and to fight them. So this was punishment, justly deserved punishment of things they'd been doing for maybe generations. So it wasn't quite as harsh maybe as we would judge them today. They got kind of what they deserved, or what they'd been. God had spared them for many, apparently, years and years, and had not had given them the punishment that they deserved, but now He did. So, oh yes, they were bad people to start with. Weird.
We could say the Gibeonites got smart, and they decided to make peace with Israel because they saw what was happening and that God was with them.
Mm-hmm. They if you read that, it's kind of interesting. The Gibeonites, they dressed up in old clothes and
moldy bread.
Had moldy bread and their shoes. And they took on and they explained, look, we've been traveling a long time. Our clothes are dirty. We're all this kind of stuff, and our water bags are got holes in them, and, we've had to patch them, and all these different things went on. And in reality, they were pretty well off. But the bread, see how moldy our bread is? We've been traveling a long time. See how moldy and crusty it is? It's not fresh. We didn't bake this yesterday. We've been traveling a long time. So they made peace and I guess survived. The Israelites made them hewers of wood and drawing of water, made them slaves or made them servants, I guess. Maybe slave is not the word, but made them servants. Janice?
The Israelites didn't know about them, but the Gideonites knew about the Israelites. And in that world of poor communication, how the word got around.
Well, and you read this, word got around a lot. It had to be just word of mouth. Oh, yeah, more than you would think, yes.
Look at Rahab.
Right. Rahab, she knew that, like I can see the writing on the wall, so to speak, that this is going to happen. You guys are going to be successful, and I know what's going to happen to me if we don't make some arrangements. But she... Right. The warriors in these other countries, I think, our gods can't hold back the Jordan River while they cross on dry land. Their God's pretty powerful to be able to do that, especially if it was done during flood stage, too.
The wonderful story of Ruth. Ruth was the Moabitist. Yet, she says, your God shall be my God. Intensely interesting.
And the Holy Spirit guided the others who Rahab was.
Well, as conflict kind of starts to occur, when the tribes, I guess, were going back home across the Jordan River, the Reubenites and the Gadites, half tribe of Manasseh, they were going back to the east. They built an altar. They took stones and built an altar. And the other 9.5 tribes says they saw that and they wait a minute. Are you people already falling away and not trusting God, and you're building an altar to false gods? And then that's when the conflict started. It says if I can find it. They had decided they were going to go to war. The 9.5 tribes were going to go to war. The Civil War was getting ready to break out. And I got to thinking, from the 9.5 tribes side of this equation, what did they see? What was their attitude? What was their reasoning for doing what they were doing? We'll straighten them out, okay? Anybody else, please?
It's all that all over again. We're not going down that road. We got to stop this right now.
Well, right. It was like self-protection. If we don't stop them, it's not going to fall just on them. It's going to fall on all of us. So we better straighten those folks out or do something with them so we're not affected by that punishment that may come our way, that will come our way. So let's see if we can get into this a little bit. If I can start off in chapter 22, verse 16. The whole congregation of the Lord inquires, why have you committed this transgression against God of Israel, turning away from Him, turning away from the Lord now by building an altar in rebellion against Him? Have you not had enough sin at Baal Peor, from which we have not yet rid ourselves, and because of the plague that fell upon the congregation of the Lord? Have you turned away from the Lord? Have you rebelled against the Lord? tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation. Now if the land in your possession is unclean, cross over the land which the Lord possesses, where his tabernacle stands, and take possession among us. But neither rebel against the Lord nor against us by building an altar for yourselves. They built an altar. And and it's reading somewhere, I think it was built out of stone. Apparently it's pretty impressive. Gary?
They were very much into, I believe the West wanted this settled, not a fight. They even offered to share their land with the tribes that were on the east side if the division had anything to do with them trespassing, they thought.
What happens in your personal interaction with folks when they come up against you and accuse you of something? You know what you did. Just a real fight going on. What's your reaction to that? Defensive, yeah. When somebody gets right up in your face and accuses you of something that you didn't do, what's your response going to be? You're going to show them. You're not going to tell me that.
Depends on who's on the throne of your heart that day,
Right.
that moment.
I'm looking for a Kleenex somewhere. There's some rolled Kleenex in the.
We have a
Uh,
Well, later on in that verse 17, it says, to this very day we have not cleansed ourselves.
right.
Even though that's
Right.
so they were filthy.
Maybe.
Was their reason?
They may have just been aware of that. The Lord, well, when something like that happens, it doesn't just instantly disappear. The residual people remember things, and it doesn't, you're gone but not forgotten kind of thing. Well, so the 9.5 tribes were just really upset with the other folks on the other side of the Jordan. Look what you guys are getting into trouble. You're gonna get us all into trouble. And what was the response? Would you read?
Proverbs 15, verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Or a soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger.
If you notice, their response was, I guess the word would be measured. They didn't explode on these folks, as you and I might have, lose our temper, so to speak. You can't accuse me of that kind of thing. They had a measured response, and they took a lot of patience. They listened to the whole argument. And if you from our viewpoint, we can kind of see this. The 9.5 tribes may have kind of jumped to a conclusion that was not accurate. They jumped the gun on that. I see this altar over there. Well, you guys are obviously going to do this. That's the reason you built it, which was not the reason. And I'd underlined some stuff. Now I can't really kind of see what I underlined. Malcolm?
The 9.5 tribes, 7.5 tribes, however you want to call it, they sent Phinehas you know what Phinehas did in the past. Anyway, they sent a delegation with him to find out what's all going on. Now, they might have had their armies already marshaled, ready to go, but civil war, yes, maybe. But let's see what it's all going to be about.
Well, right, so the 9.5 tribes, they didn't just start the war. That wasn't their first move. They did send a delegation over, and if I read that right, there's probably 10 men, maybe, one from each tribe, kind of a leader in that particular tribe that went and to say, look, what's going on? And the response from the 2.5 tribes was, well, the Lord knows what we're doing. We've kind of cleared it with Him. We feel like this is the right thing to do. And the reason we did this, is there another case where a altar was built? In their history, not long prior to this, 6 or 7 years prior, when they crossed the Jordan, it says they picked each tribe picked up one stone and carried it out of the Jordan, out of the bottom of the river, and placed it, I guess, in a pile as an altar.
We're talking about several things, backing up a little bit. You know, the initial response to when someone is accusing you falsely is an illustration of how evil comes from evil. So when something is being done that's evil to you, that's a temptation to return evil. And I admire their patience that they knew the whole time that they were innocent of what they were being charged with. And yet they sat quiet and allowed the other side to vent and release and say whatever they wanted to say before they responded. And I think the lesson can be illustrated by how God designed us. He gave us 2 ears and only 1 tongue. And if you'll notice, our 2 ears are always open to hear and to learn. But we only have 1 tongue, which is guarded by 2 sets of teeth to keep it appropriately restrained. And I think there's a lesson there. Keep your ears open. Listen and learn before you speak.
They also point out that they had, just think if they had not the right leadership, right? I mean, if they had somebody that was hot-headed, or, they could have just shot off at the hip without having to hear it. So it's awfully important who your leadership is, because those representatives could have flung them into civil war or, avoided it like they ended up doing.
So
I think it's fortunate they didn't have social media.
we have a comment over here. In some ways, social media is a blessing, and other times not so much.
I also think it took a two-party thing. And a lot of times in disputes, you typically have 2 parties that are not willing to negotiate. Here we saw one party that came with the issue, because they could have easily just marched their army on the other side. Let's just confront it face to face. They sent a delegation. The other party answered in a very polite, de-escalating way. And to me, the most important thing was that the 9.5 tribes, I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday, knew how to say, I'm sorry. They knew how to apologize. Because for you to continue in this terminology that we call unity, Amos says that how can 2 walk unless they what? They agree. But if one does a harm and then doesn't apologize, can they still walk? Not really. So, yeah, they did come in maybe a passive-aggressive way, but at the end of the day, they knew how to apologize.
Well, it talks about the patience of the 2.5 tribes, how they, and I guess that lesson would be for us to try to be patient with folks, and maybe not make the worst assumption.
It's real interesting. The Lord advises us not to hold ourselves above others, to, it's just listen to what others have to say and actually give them the benefit of the doubt to the point where you will actually, if there's not a moral issue involved, I believe we're advised to acquiesce to the other's opinion, if you will, if it will keep peace.
Right. Well, peace and unity, that may be the same word, or similar words, closely related. So after this, why did the 2.5 tribes build the altar to start with? What was their reasoning? To what? Memorial to, yes, but to what?
Well, they were concerned that because of the river being a natural boundary, that as generations came along, there might be a time when one side feels the other side is not really part of them. And they wanted this memorial to remind everybody of what the truth was.
Well, and to remind them of the events that occurred, and I think you can kind of appreciate this when your kids were maybe younger and you saw a statue or you saw something, a rainbow. I can remember asking my parents, what's that all about? And they tell you the story, of Noah and how that came to be. And that's a good teaching moment. Same thing, if you see a statue of George Washington, who is that guy? Well, now you have an opportunity to explain that and to show your kids and transfer that information from you to them, and hopefully they would transfer that on down the line. And I think that's the point, is it's an everlasting memorial to the things that went on at that particular day, or those days there, while they were negotiating or talking about this. So that would be an inspiration. That's a way to, it's an unwritten example, I guess, of things that occurred in the past. It's an oral tradition where you could pass it along. They did give a gentle answer and explain to them that if God wanted us to not do this, God knows what we're doing. We've kind of cleared it with Him, so to speak. And if we're not doing what God wants to do, have God come down and wipe us out. They were saying we're convinced that we're right in what we're doing. And the 9.5 tribes says, I accept that. I understand that. It makes sense. And we believe you. And then the big issue, the big problem was settled. But it's sometimes awful easy to have over here, mic person, over here, sleep at the switch here. Janice.
I heard a lecture one time that really has been valuable to me, and that is that every person, whatever they do, makes sense to them. Unless you figure out how it makes sense to them, you may not be able to change the situation.
Kind of put yourself in other person's shoes to kind of, what is their viewpoint, what's their ideas. And you can kind of see how this conflict started. The motives, I think, of the 9.5 tribes were we want God to be premier. We don't want anything to step in that way. We know what happens if we deviate from serving God. So their motives were pure, and these folks apparently were going astray. So how can we correct them? So that they were able to work that out. But sometimes you jump to conclusions. Let's say, Janice, did you have a comment? I hope.
Should they have foreseen how it would be interpreted? Should they have asked for counsel in advance?
Yeah, it might have created a smoother transition, yes. They didn't communicate.
We wouldn't have a good story.
They did not communicate with leadership, which was Joshua and maybe the people there around him. You know, we're getting ready to do this, and this is what we've talked about it, and we've thought about it, and this is what we want to do, and that would have smoothed the way, yes. And communications is a secret to that. There's some kind of, I was trying to remember some kind of a crazy line in a movie. All we have here is a failure to communicate. Cool Hand Luke, that's what it is. How many people remember that movie? Anyway, that's communication is the answer to that. It would smooth the way a lot. But let's say you're driving home today and in your car, and you have a flat tire, and the only place you can get pulled off is right in front of the ABC store. And I drive by and I see your car sitting there. I think, what's he doing in there? He's in, you know, I've wondered about that guy all along. That's the way it starts, and that's kind of what we had here. They jumped to a conclusion that was not in reality. So I guess that what kind of trying to learn from that, what can we learn from that? Maybe to ask a few more questions back here.
What is that? I guess it's an Eastern one that they credit to seek first to understand before being understood, right? And that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
That's what Janice is alluding to.
So it's awful easy to jump to conclusions, and usually it's the wrong, many times it's the wrong conclusion, and it's the most damaging conclusion that you can come up with. You know, how many times do you do things right and don't get credit for it? Maybe I'll stop to help you fix your tire. Now we're both down there in front of the ABC store. So, you know, it's awful easy to jump to conclusions in the wrong way. But if we remain calm and considerate and listen to what the other person's point of view is, we can kind of minimize or smooth out some of those differences. And there may be a very good explanation for what these people are doing and what we might be doing, you know, and that we're questioned about. Okay, now input from the audience, more input from the audience about today's lesson study.
It was interesting that the tribes on the west side of the Jordan were willing to make a sacrifice in order to achieve unity. In other words, the West Jordan tribes were willing to give up part of their allotment to accommodate the east side.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was very interesting.
In reading about that, apparently part of the tribe of Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan was good grazing land, is what I understood. And a lot of those people with the tribe of Manasseh had large herds of cattle, I guess, and sheep or whatever. So they needed large, you know, spaces to be able to graze their herds and do well with that. I did find that Gibeon, I believe I'm right, Gibeon came out of the tribe of Manasseh. Gary?
Another thing that I think we would, our personal rights, we would think we don't want to do what the Lord suggests here is that when, even though you were the one that made the accusation, when the dust settles and you find out you were wrong, we are supposed to rejoice with the people that were right. And that's not the way I do.
I don't want to be wrong. I know I wasn't wrong. I may have been mistaken, but I wasn't wrong.
This is a good example of how the conflict is resolved when there's misunderstanding. But what happens and how do you approach or deal with a situation when this doesn't happen, when one party just will not cooperate?
Well, in this case, there's been a civil war, is what was going to happen. I'm not sure that probably something like that would happen also. You have to, I don't know, conflict resolution is a challenge. Here comes the answer now.
No, I'm not trying to give an answer. Well, I mean, in the Bible, it tells us that the carnal heart is evil, right?
Right.
So that's why they jump to the conclusion in the first place, and that's why we do it. It's why I don't want to see you succeed, because somehow that takes something away from me and all the rest of it that we do as humans, right? I mean, so if we're honest about that, so when somebody is gracious back to us, I think that's what opens that door to allow that, I guess, the healing cycle, that if all of us can just realize this is the base where we're starting from, and we're not looking at each other for the answers. It's really coming from God. You know, he imparts his righteousness to us, and that's how we're able to do what's right.
Yeah, trying to do what's right is maybe not always the easiest thing to do, but yeah, it's the right thing to do. Over here.
To me, one of the biggest takeaways of this lesson is how important communication and honesty is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can sit down and have a good conversation and even agree to disagree to a certain point, but just talk. Be transparent. You know, a lot of us hide behind this veil of smoke, and we try to look good or try to be something we're not. Just be who you are. The church will get along so much better, and it'll be able to march so much further if we're just honest and communicate.
Well, it's kind of like if we gave each person I'm going to say a white paper plate and a magic marker to draw a face on, draw your face on it, and that's what we hold up for people to see. That's what I want you to see is the face that I want you to see. In reality, behind that false facade, there may be problems or disappointments and all kinds of bad things may be going on. But we want you to see the happy face, that you drew. We agree that we're not always conflict-free. We have 2 more lessons in this quarter, and if you're going to have to miss 1 week, you should have missed this week, because the teacher next week is going to be really good. So you need to be here next week to hear that person talk. They've got a really good topic to work on. Let's close with prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for letting us be here today to study your word. We know that you're in our presence. We ask that you'll be with us as we go through the rest of the service. Be with each person and the people that are leading out today to help them to be focused on what needs to be done and give us your word. In Jesus' name, amen. And our bell should be ringing most momentarily.